Last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. In New Hampshire, the state's Attorney General Michael Delaney is upset about a House Redress of Grievance Committee's inquiry into fraud committed by the child protective industry, accusing the committee of having chilling effects on the state's ability to protect kids by harassing child welfare officials when in fact it's them harassing families. In Arizona, children who were snatched by CPS agents are being turned away from overcrowded shelters because they're too full. In California, Los Angeles County CPS agents are taking too long to complete child abuse investigations. And in Texas, an adoption agency abruptly closes its doors, leaving more than 30 prospective parents worrying about whether or not they'll get a baby or at least get their money back. In Georgia this week, it is revealed that the state, under court order to improve conditions for foster kids in 2 counties, poached money from all the other counties in order to do it. So now all of the other counties are feeling the strain of deep budget cuts, while at the same time snatching more kids. In Iowa, more than 100 local parents showed up to a forum to tell the child protective industry to put more emphasis on keeping kids in their homes. In Connecticut, a report from federal overseers says that the state is still struggling with their foster care system by being unable to recruit or retain foster parents. In Minnesota, a legislator is trying to ban smoking in foster homes. In Nebraska, the governor signs 5 child welfare reform bills into law, including more money for foster care providers, creating a state children's commission, and a web-based child welfare information system. And Nebraska continues the practice of taking children from blind parents, thinking that their disability makes them unable to care for the kids. In Pennsylvania this week, the governor signs a juvenile justice reform bill following a scandal where judges gave kids lengthy terms in corporate-run jails in exchange for kickbacks. The House Armed Services Committee is trying to drum up Pentagon support for service members' rights in child custody disputes. Catholic bishops in the United States are urging the public not to obey laws that counter their religious beliefs or moral teachings, especially having to do with abortion or contraception. In Vermont, the governor signs a Siblings Bill of Rights protecting some family relationships after years of keeping kids separated from their biological brothers and sisters in the state's foster care system. And the state of Oklahoma is expected to be number 1 for abuse and neglect in the foster care system again because they have decided to include kids who are abused in group homes and children's shelters in their reporting of the numbers of kids who are abused and neglected while in state care. In Russia this week, a now 9-year-old boy who was rejected by his adopted mother in Tennessee and put on a plane and sent back to Russia is said to be adapting to life in his new foster home. In New Zealand, a growing number of children exhibiting highly sexualized behaviors are being referred to counselors, and they're blaming the television and video games for this. A real father who was deported back to Mexico fights to regain custody of his kids, but the child protective industry and the foster parents want them to be adopted in North Carolina. In Zimbabwe, human rights groups are concerned over the practice of virginity testing, where girls who are accused of being sexually abused are stripped down and have their genitals inspected by adults. In India, it is revealed that as many as 33 infants died in the Kerala State Child Welfare Council's care homes in the city since 2003, and a Bangalore child welfare official is accused of raping a woman who runs a school for children with special needs. In Canada this week, a group of social workers is fearing for their lives if their identities are revealed during a public inquiry into the death of a little foster girl. Nova Scotia police are investigating 17 horrific claims of alleged abuse at an orphanage. A Manitoba woman backs out of a class action lawsuit that would have stopped the province from deducting child support payments from her public assistants after an online backlash against her. And a group in Edmonton, Alberta holds a rally to raise awareness about a lack of accountability within the province's foster care system. Another group protests in Calgary demanding more openness, accountability, and an end to a publication ban when a child dies in foster care. This after Alberta reveals that 10 children had died in their foster care system in the last year, including one who died just 6 days after being snatched from her mother. And a foster mother who killed a 4-year-old girl gets a 7.5-year prison sentence with 5 years already served. In Australia, a 13-year-old foster kid gets killed while stealing her foster parents' car after a disagreement and crashing it into a tree. In England, a mother who feels like a breeder for the adoption industry after being forced to give up her 2 kids to a gay couple for adoption and is now pregnant with twins books an abortion to prevent British social workers from snatching those kids too. British doctor is gagged for expressing serious doubts about many shaken baby syndrome convictions. British teachers are calling for the prosecution of kids who falsely accuse them of sexual abuse. And the baby P effect is being blamed for the record number of children being snatched into foster care in England, as the number of stolen children surpasses 10,000 in a single year. In entertainment news this week, MTV's 16 and Pregnant star Ebony Rendon is pregnant again not 6 months after CPS agents snatched their other kid away. Former Grey's Anatomy star Katherine Heigl feels like a failure of a mother after failing to bond with her adopted daughter. Melissa Etheridge's ex-girlfriend wants more child support money from the singer because she's struggling to survive on the $23,000 a month she's already getting. John Goslin is $3,500 behind on his child support. And in sports, former Chicago Bulls basketball player Dennis Rodman is facing legal charges after being $860,000 behind in his child support payments. In Illinois this week, a notorious madam who was also an adoptive parent who had the kids taken away tears up in court while trying to get them back. In Flagstaff, Arizona, a foster parent is busted for molesting foster kids. In California, a former state employee gets 14 years for masterminding a child care fraud ring. And in Florida, George Zimmerman is charged with second-degree murder in the death of Trayvon Martin. In Missouri, a foster parent is charged with child abuse after an infant nearly died in her care back in 2009. In Ohio, a former foster kid is accused of killing his foster father. In Massachusetts, a TSA agent is accused of distributing child porn. And in Indiana, a mother and her boyfriend are in jail for murdering her son because Child Protective Services didn't do anything to protect him even though his father reported them to the child abuse hotline. In Texas, in what can only be described as a vendetta, CPS agents snatched two kids from a loving grandmother to cover their own failures to investigate a complaint 3 months earlier regarding the children's exposure to drug use. A kid who was removed from a messy house in Texas is returned home after the parents fulfill the demands of CPS agents. And in New Jersey, a court rules that a mother who slapped her kid in the face after he kicked his sister did in fact commit child abuse. In Utah, a real mother is trying to change the laws after CPS agents show up at her door claiming that she wasn't doing enough to feed her kid despite her attempts at breastfeeding and giving the kid formula. In Florida, a 10-year-old autistic girl drowns in a pond. And finally tonight, in California, prosecutors lock up a 17-year-old rape victim to make sure she shows up at court to testify against the guy who raped her. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK. Over and out.